It was Saturday afternoon. I guessed it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and my right big toe was hurting terribly. I don't know about anyone, but for me, besides toothache, the worst pain is an ingrown toenail, especially when I'm on my knees all day in the flower beds. I don't particularly like flower beds, but my wife Susan does, and by default I have to do this work on the weekends. Susan, like me, works during the week, and lately she's been busy with different things on Saturdays. On Saturday mornings, she usually gets up early, starts washing, and then, after separating white and colored laundry, goes shopping. Her afternoons for the past few months have been taken up with various activities that I know little about and care even less about, such as one of those county planning commissions on zoning issues and such, and another one related to environmental conservation and protection of local wildlife. She also serves on a committee at the local public library. So I have to finish the laundry unless I can get our daughter Samantha to help. God help us, Samantha is 17, a senior, has her own car, and is impossible to talk to, let alone do anything with. Our son Greg is a little better. He helps, but only if it's something he thinks is important. He's 15, and sometimes if I wave my car keys at him, he'll stay long enough to load a load or two of laundry, but it has to be his clothes, and his efforts never last longer than lunch. That leaves me with mowing the lawn, working in the flower beds, doing laundry, and occasionally vacuuming the carpets. It sounds worse than it actually is. That's not true, and as the kids got older, Susan freed me from going to church on Sunday mornings. So Sundays are practically free for me, and I can spend time on the lake, fishing or canoeing. In cool weather I can fish, or, if I find a partner, hunt, and in winter I can ride a snowmobile. Back to my leg. She was sick all day. Maybe it's time to do something about it. I entered the house through the back door, took off my muddy shoes, and walked through the kitchen and dining room to the stairs. We have a typical two-story house. We've lived in it for just under 16 years. When we bought it, it was a little worn but still in great condition. Climbing the stairs, walking along the corridor, to the right, I found myself in the bedroom. Susan's dad gave her a luxury manicure set when she graduated from high school, and I use it from time to time. Taking off my smelly right sock, I opened the top drawer of Susan's dresser and found the set. Walking into the bathroom, I turned on the hot water in the bath. The plan was simple: warm my foot, soften the nail, sit on the toilet, trim the ingrown toenail, and end my suffering. But I was suddenly stopped by what I saw in Susan's dresser drawer. There was a 3-ring notebook, 21x28 cm, the kind children often use. Nothing special, I think just an old notebook. But wait, it was different. It had a title, My Life. What is this? I asked myself. Susan never kept a diary, at least not that I remember, and I've known her since college. I wonder if this is a novel she's writing. She always said that she wanted to try her hand at writing. Perhaps this is a catalog of notes from her meetings? Yes, of course, these are notes from her meetings. Or maybe she really started keeping a diary. Interestingly, she never mentioned anything like that to me. Maybe it's something secret that I shouldn't know about. But in the end, it's none of my business. No, it's none of my business. I decided to ignore it. Besides, I had a sore leg that needed immediate attention, so I went to the bathroom. I trimmed the nail, washed and dried my foot, and returned the set to its place. There was that notebook again. Interesting, maybe take a little peek, just a sneak peek. What harm could this cause? Oh, Susan just pulled up to the house. I returned the set to its place, closed the drawer, and left the bedroom. Maybe another time. So I forgot about it, so what? If Susan wants to keep a little diary or a few notes about what she did, that's her right, and I don't have the right to pry into her affairs. However, from time to time I did look in her dresser drawer to see if it was there. It was there, but it didn't look like she had peed in it. It didn't look like it had been moved. Besides, our relationship over the past few months couldn't have been better. Why bring anything up? In terms of changes in our relationship, this is something I was especially proud of. We were married for 16 years. Of course, if anyone wants, they can count and see that Susan was pregnant before our marriage. Hell, we were both young, and well, sometimes these things happen. Susan told me she was pregnant, so we got married and Samantha was born a few months later. I remember talking to a few of my fraternity brothers. Some were for it, saying that marrying Susan was not only right, it was right because we really loved each other. Of course, there were those who disagreed. They said she was just another girl, and several people reminded me that Susan had slept with others, even a couple of my brothers. I understood this, I knew it. I knew a couple of guys who were with her before me. I kept our first dates as calm and modest as possible. I had real feelings for her. I knew that my feelings were partly out of guilt and maybe a little pity. She had crossed the line before we met and had developed a reputation for being too promiscuous. There were guys who boasted, and there were always those who liked to whisper. So I remember when we got married. We went home and told our parents. Her mother and father accepted it, but I felt that they were disappointed in their daughter, but somehow appreciated mine. Nobility, her father even said that what I was doing was honorable. I wasn't sure if he was being a little sarcastic. He said that I didn't have to do it, and that they could take care of their daughter. I countered by telling him that I love his daughter and cannot imagine anyone I would like to marry more. My parents were delighted. Although they thought we were too young and that we were in a hurry, they fully supported us. In fact, it was my mom and dad who gave us the money to rent a decent place, and when Susan's parents realized they could no longer afford her tuition, my parents found the money for that too. Then, when Susan gave birth, my mother came and moved in with us to help. My two brothers and sister didn't appreciate it, but they knew Mom would do the same for them if they needed it. Besides, I was the youngest. Bob, Gary, and Juanita had already moved out and started their own families and careers. Since then, family life has not been ideal. I had a hard time finding a job, but eventually I got a job with a medium-sized construction company that needed an accountant willing to accept slightly less pay. I stuck it out, and as the company grew, so did my responsibilities and income. Susan had fewer problems. She almost immediately began working part-time at an insurance agency and soon found a well-paying job with a prestigious national insurance company. Since then, she has grown within the company and is currently an assistant manager at a branch in a major city near our home. Money was tight in the beginning, and the birth of Samantha 2 years after our son Greg added to the burden. We held on, of course. There were quarrels and threats, but we managed. I loved her very much, and I knew that she loved me. Even after all these years, finances remained a little tight, and there were times when I thought our relationship was in jeopardy, but over the past year, everything has been going smoothly. The last time I looked in the top drawer of Susan's dresser, the notebook was still there, and it looked like she hadn't touched it. But the other day I noticed that it had been moved. I wondered, what does Susan write in it? I justified myself. Why not take a look? Just one little glance, I opened it. I didn't know where to start or what exactly to expect, but it was obvious that this was a fairly new notebook. It was a narrow-lined, three-subject, three-ring notebook with hundreds of pages, and it appeared to be partially filled. I opened the first page, and wow, after the first few lines, I realized that she was writing about me. The more I read, the better I felt. That was great. She wrote about me, and what she said was wonderful. So she started. I still can't believe it's true. Even almost 20 years later, I remember what my friends told me. Susan, when the right person comes along, you'll know. He'll just sweep you off your feet. I remember it like it was yesterday. In a way, it almost was. I was at a party and I saw him. He was standing off to the side talking to several men. I knew most of them, but I never had the opportunity to meet him. I felt tipsy and didn't know what to do. But one of my friends tapped me on the elbow. "He's handsome, isn't he?" "Really handsome," I replied. "Do you know him?" "Yes," she said, and led me to him. He was so handsome, with wild brown hair, big brown eyes. He stood so straight, and when he looked at me, even from across the room, I just knew that I had found the one, the special one, oh, where all the fairy tales were told. I was. "Jeremy, are you upstairs? Dinner is almost ready." It was my wife. Crap. I had to put my notebook down. "Yes, I'm here." I'll be down in a minute. I carefully put the notebook back the way I found it. I quickly went into the bathroom. Why did I even go upstairs? Splashed cold water on my face, dried myself with a towel, and hurried downstairs. In the dining room, Susan had already set everything. The children, Samantha and Greg, waited. Susan looked at me and smiled. Today is one of your favorite dinners. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and cabbage. Just the way you like it. Greg chimed in. Yeah, like Royal Farms. His mother frowned. Who cares where it's cooked? Your father likes it. I took my seat at the head of the table. Shut up, Greg. I smiled at Susan, but frowned at Greg. Maybe one day when you grow up, you'll find someone like your mother, and then it won't matter where the food comes from, but only who cared enough to prepare it for you. Susan blushed. A bored Samantha sighed. Greg ignored me and reached for the chicken. I scolded him. Not now, Greg. Fold your arms. And so all four clasped their hands while their mother said a prayer of thanksgiving. May the Lord make us truly grateful for what we now receive and for all our many blessings, both big and small. Amen. We all said amen and started eating. We usually ate slowly and talked, but today Samantha had plans, Greg had homework, and Susan had another meeting. I didn't have anything to do. Towards the end of the meal, Susan waved her hand over the table. She usually called me Jerome instead of Jeremy. Is that okay with you? I want to get to the meeting a little early. I smiled. Of course, honey. She smiled back, stood up, kissed me on the cheek, and wasted no time walking out the door. Samantha followed behind. Greg was halfway up the stairs when I thought, what an opportunity. I can go back to that notebook. I want to read more about myself. I cleaned up the kitchen, put all the leftovers in the refrigerator, packed everything neatly, waited until I was sure Greg was fully occupied in his room, and then went upstairs myself. I found the notebook, opened it again, and continued reading. He's so right. He embodies everything I've ever looked for in a man. He's polite, attentive, funny to talk to, and is interested in the same things I am. He likes old movies, not modern color ones, but old black ones. White with stars like Norma Shearer and Joan Crawford. I wondered, I've never seen that old stuff, and although I've heard and even seen some of the old Joan Crawford movies, for example, I don't remember who is Norma Shearer. I read on. She must have stopped writing. At the bottom was the date, January 11, 2011. Today is September 22nd. I counted back. That was almost 10 months ago. Okay, I'm on to the next entry. His name is Robert Bob Schuster. He's not married. Peggy Jeffords said he's a widower, about 35, and works for a publishing house, but she couldn't remember which one. He has no children. I thought about what I had just read and was filled with horror. Bob Schuster. He worked in a publishing house. Susan started helping out in the library. One of her responsibilities was to organize potential guest lectures for what she called the library forum. Was he the one? It can't be. I knew that I was the one for her. My stomach clenched. I stopped reading and looked ahead. I flipped through a few pages. His name was mentioned a few times, not often, just occasionally. Then I remembered how often I sat in meetings when the senior partners of my company met with men and women from other companies. I often took notes and wrote little memos to myself. Quite often I was asked to discuss something with my partner. I took my notes with me and often realized that my notes would mean little to anyone else. I thought, these must be Susan's notes. She's just confused. I thought again. I know what I'll do. I'll look up my name. I'm sure she's written a lot about me. I scrolled forward. My name came up from time to time, but mostly it was the usual stuff, like me driving Greg to scout practice, fixing Samantha's car after she hit someone in the Walmart parking lot, me getting sick and missing work despite having a flu shot. Nothing too important, but then I came across a post from March. I was quite noticeable on a few lines, and I didn't like it. She wrote, I know I should love Jeremy. I should love him. I was pregnant. He didn't have to marry me. He didn't have to take responsibility for raising my child. I wasn't even sure Samantha was his daughter until we did a DNA test for something related to school. He loves me. Oh, I love him, just not like I should, more like a brother or a very close friend. I know that I will always be grateful to him. I put the notebook down. I looked at a photo taken last year. All four of us were there. The children looked great. Susan looked beautiful in one of her blue dresses. With her hair down, she was smiling. I thought I looked okay. But what did it all mean? I scrolled back to where I saw Bob's name. I found 4 separate mentions. On February 8, she mentioned him again. He came to me last week in January. He said he wanted to discuss the possibility of inviting an author. I agreed that we could meet at our next monthly meeting. He asked when it would be. I said in February. He said, okay. I remembered all this because at work and at home he could not leave my head. He is so handsome and his voice is so sonorous he could be an announcer on television. I don't know why I'm writing this down. I think it's because Jeremy and I had a big fight last night about money. Jeremy sometimes gets so annoying when he yells. I get a headache when I want to talk about something. Doesn't pay attention to me. I swear it's like talking to a brick wall. I stopped. I must have missed some entry about myself in the previous viewing. I think I'll read a little further. Then I thought again, I'll go back. Here's something for January 28th. I opened the date on my iPhone, and it was Thursday. Here's what she wrote. Saw Mr. Selzer Schuster, Bob, this evening. We were having coffee at Starbucks. He said he had a young writer with a great novel set in West Texas in the late 19th century. He gave me a copy and asked me to read it. I took it, and then we talked. I told him that I heard that he was a widower. He said that he was, but he didn't like to talk about it. He said, maybe when we get to know each other better, I'll tell him. He looked so sad when he mentioned her name, Glenna. He showed me a picture of her. She looked a lot like me. I said maybe we could meet for coffee again. He suggested February 14th. I said that's Valentine's Day. He said he knew it was once a special day for him. I changed my mind. I agreed that we would meet at Starbucks again on Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, I thought. I remembered bringing home flowers from Walmart for her and Samantha. They both thanked me. I remember laughing when Samantha lowered her head so I could kiss her hair. She had a date and didn't want me to ruin her makeup. Susan kissed me on the cheek and thanked me. Later, I remember her saying that she had a meeting. I didn't pay any attention to it. I remember that she could not be away for long. I scrolled forward and found something dated February 15th. Nothing special, just a quick note, she wrote. Saw Bob last night. He was so sad. I told him I'd read the novel. I read it and thought it was great. I was sure our readers would be interested in meeting the author. We didn't stay long. I told him that I needed to return home. Jeremy gave me flowers and probably expected something. I tried to be lighthearted, but I think it was another reminder that my husband was lucky. I agreed and we left. I closed the notebook, but left myself a reminder to look there again. I thought, Susan seems to have feelings for this guy. I decided to put it off until later. She had been attracted to other men before, and it didn't work out. Despite what she might say about the brother thing, I knew she loved me. Yes, I'll wait. I'm not a fool. I told myself, just be calm. I look back, I look forward. Then there was Thursday, September 15th. I took the day off to go to the Frederick Fair next week. The Frederick Fair is very similar to many state fairs, but is not a state fair. We always had a good time. I decided to take Tuesday the 20th off. For as long as I can remember, we always went there on Tuesdays. Tuesdays were senior people's days, and even though Susan's parents had died, Tuesdays were still our day. Susan's parents lived in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, near Frederick. I'm talking about Frederick, Maryland. We lived outside of Pittsburgh, and the trip usually took all day. So I took the day off and checked my schedule. Since it was Thursday, I thought I'd stay a little longer, and I'll do a few things to be ready for Friday. There were no appointments on Friday, but the next week was full. So I stayed late at work and thought, why not do a little research? Why not find this Robert Schuster? I found information about him. He actually worked for the publisher, HarperCollins. He maintained an office at his New York City headquarters, but traveled frequently to promote selected works in target markets. I didn't find much information other than how to contact him. I don't think I needed it. I learned that he was a real person, and that he had truthfully represented himself to my wife. Later, on the way home, I thought about meeting him. I would only do this if I had time and if it didn't seem intrusive. When I got home that evening, I told Susan that I was taking the following Tuesday off so we could go to the fair. She surprised me by replying, "Oh, that's not good. I have a library meeting scheduled. How about Wednesday or Thursday?" I said I was sure they were busy since I had meetings too. We both knew Friday was out, Samantha was a cheerleader, and there would definitely be a game. We couldn't leave Greg and Samantha home alone all day and most of the night on such an evening. So the trip to the fair was canceled this year, not for the first time and probably not for the last, although I, a city boy, rarely felt like a country boy. I knew I could handle it. Later that Thursday night, Susan came to bed wearing a negligee. She wanted to have some fun, and we did it. Things at work became increasingly stressful over the course of several days, and I almost completely forgot about Susan's notebook. In fact, I didn't get back to it until mid-October. There was so much there, and a lot of it was really ordinary stuff about her job, her sister, and her social gatherings. Plus, a lot of it was just carelessly written down and difficult to read. I scrolled through all the summer months and didn't find anything important. However, there were some disturbing entries in September. One was dated the 16th. I checked my iPhone and remembered that it was the Friday after I unexpectedly seduced Susan. This is what she wrote down. Felt bad for Jeremy. He always loved the Frederick Fair. He could play farmer and walk around like one of the locals. I never told him how out of place he looked. Imagine an accountant playing farmer in the Hollow. I fell in love with him a little that night. Maybe it was guilt, I can't say, but I just couldn't get into it. I thought about Bob, how lonely he must be. Damn, I thought she did something. Was she pretending? I didn't think so, and this Bob, how did he get here? Then I realized we are no longer a couple. There were three of us, me, Susan, and Bob. Maybe I should dig deeper. These were her notes for Friday the 16th. I scrolled further. Nothing special for a couple of weeks. She mentioned that they met around Tuesday when we were supposed to go to the fair, but all her notes were about that new writer, nothing about her or him. Then I found something. Halloween was on a Monday, but our neighborhood did a house crawl the previous Friday. Susan and I prepared candy, mostly Snickers. We went together with the children when they were little, I by car, she on foot. Greg always wore the Batman costume or a variation thereof, and Samantha always wore either Ariel or Cinderella. I always thought she looked adorable. We had photographs of her mother. They were so similar. On the night of the candy distribution, October 28, 2011, Susan said that she needed to see her sister and that it was important. I couldn't object. She and my sister were very close, and I suspected that Roxanne, her sisters, there were some problems, but I didn't know what, but I understood that they were serious. I told Susan to go and I'll deal with the candy. 2 days later, I checked the notebook, and there it was. Dated Sunday, October 30th. It was like reading something from True Confessions or some other women's magazine. I couldn't believe what she wrote. I told Bob I thought I was falling in love with him. He said he was falling in love with me too. We held hands. I was stunned. Nothing more until Wednesday. Imagine, just a few days later, they met again on Wednesday afternoon in a restaurant. She didn't mention the restaurant, but said, our restaurant. Our restaurant. She must have taken half a day. Here's what she wrote. I saw Bob again. He wants to go somewhere. I told him no, at least not yet. I told him I was married. I told him Jeremy is a wonderful person. I admitted that I don't love him anymore, but I owe him. I just can't betray him. Bob understands. This was on Wednesday, November 5th. She left another note on Friday, and it destroyed me. God, I don't know what to do. Bob called this morning. He said he loved me again. He said he was tired of platonic things. He couldn't help it. He said that what we have is either real or it's not. He had to make it real. He said he would do everything, but he couldn't continue like this. Then she wrote, "I love him. I love him. I love him." I couldn't believe the exclamation points. That evening, as we all ate dinner, Susan was extremely thoughtful. She couldn't do enough for me. I took it in stride. Plus, we were almost forced to listen to Samantha rant about her boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend, as it turned out. Samantha was dating a guy who was attending a local college. I liked the guy, but he was almost 20 and had not yet decided what he wanted to do. Samantha, as usual, fell head over heels in love at first, but after a while she got bored. She said that the guy was not very smart. He did not see the waterfall until he was under it. She did everything except push him down the stairs to make him realize she was tired of him. I asked, why doesn't she just tell him straight out? She said she didn't want to hurt his feelings. I looked at Susan. She had a very understanding look. I realized that this was her problem too. For some reason, at first I couldn't realize that Susan was gone, but she was gone. Bob showed up, showered her with his charm, and she was ready to leave. This was the first time I felt like I wanted to cry. Later I actually cried. I went out to the barn where I kept the lawn mowers and stuff, took a lawn chair, of course it was cold, but I sat down at the barn and let my tears flow. It was Friday. I went back to the house and told Susan I wanted to go fishing. I had the weekend off, and the way things were going, it might have been my only break. She asked where I was going. I told her it was in Ohio, where there was a big lake. I told her I would be leaving that night and would be gone the entire weekend. She smiled at me somehow calmly, or it was a condescending smile, and said, "Okay." I gathered my fishing gear, threw it in the back of my SUV, and drove off. Of course, I wasn't going fishing. I had to go. I needed to think things through. I drove around Pittsburgh and finally found a hotel room. There was a Steelers game in town over the weekend, and they were playing a division rival, so the best hotels were pretty much booked. I found something and got settled. I needed to think things through. I went into the room, took a hot shower, and looked at myself in the large mirror on the closet door. I was never a great athlete, but I knew I was never ashamed of my body. I played football, quarterback in school, intercepted a couple of passes, lost a few chances too. I have always loved hunting and fishing and killed several deer in high school and college. Played baseball, loved swimming, and although I liked lacrosse, I was too stocky for organized sports. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, even though I had never lifted much weight, I thought I was in pretty good shape for a 40-year-old. The belly could have been a little more toned, but there was no beer belly. The biceps looked good, the shoulders were wide, the legs had good definition. I thought I was a good find. Susan didn't know what she had. Then I thought about other things. I remembered how, after each of Susan's parents died, I couldn't feel very much. Susan, Roxanne, and Samantha were crying their eyes out. Even Greg was crying, but I just couldn't get into it. I remembered how cold they were when they found out that Susan was pregnant, and especially how my parents stood up for Susan. I think that's when it caught up with me. Susan used to say that I had a laconic nature, nothing made me angry, I never worried about anything. At work, some of my colleagues said that I was ice cold in meetings. Mom and Dad always said I was different, but they never explained what they meant. Was I that insensitive? I sat and looked at my naked body. Susan stopped loving me. Maybe she never loved me. Maybe the last 18 years have been about gratitude. If this is so, why didn't I cry? I loved her madly, always loved. In college, other guys would sometimes make comments about Susan's so-called promiscuity. Now she wrote in the damned notebook, her damned secret diary, that she loves someone else, that maybe she never loved me, not the way a man should love a woman, not like husband and wife. I think that was the moment when I broke down. I started crying and cried all night long. The next morning I went downstairs for the free breakfast, but instead went to the hotel's small swimming pool. I used my room card, opened the glass door, and jumped into the water. The water was freezing cold, but I didn't care. I floated and thought even more. What was I going to do? One day I reached the deep end, only 5 feet, tried to sink to the bottom, exhaled and did so, and began to inhale water. What if I drown myself? If I do this, it will look like an accident. Susan would cash in my insurance, pay off the house, and be able to marry her, one and only. At the last moment, I burst to the surface. No, I have children. There must be another way. I returned to my room, took a shower, got dressed, and went downstairs. Breakfast was over, so I went out, found Denny's, and ordered 2 soft-boiled eggs, a stack of pancakes, 2 sausages, and hash browns. So Susan loved someone else. She never really loved me. I was a loving, faithful fool who carried her water for almost 20 years. She wrote that she wasn't even sure Samantha was my daughter. Do I need such a woman? Yes, I do. I loved her so much. I wanted to cry again, right there in Denny's. How was that for brevity? I was ready to cry in public. Would an insensitive, reserved bastard do such a thing? I remembered how, when Samantha was little, and then Greg, I read them stories. Samantha especially loved listening to fairy tales. I remembered one story while sitting there at Denny's. Hans Christian Andersen wrote the fairy tale, The Steadfast Tin Soldier. I remember her well. Maybe it was me. There was a tin soldier, an incomplete toy. There were 20 of them, and they were all made from an old spoon, but one, due to a lack of tin, had only one leg. The one-legged tin soldier fell in love with a paper ballerina, another toy that belonged to the boy. But an evil goblin orchestrated his disappearance. He fell out of a window and had a series of frightening adventures until he was swallowed by a fish, which was caught and, as luck would have it, sold back to the same house from which he originally came. But in a fit of anger, the boy threw the poor tin soldier into the fire. At that moment, a gust of wind threw the paper ballerina into the same fire, and while the paper ballerina was burning, the crying tin soldier slowly melted. They both simply disappeared and died. Everything was lost. Why did I remember this particular fairy tale? I don't know, but I started crying again. Right there at Denny's, I started crying. Finally, I pulled myself together, paid the bill, and left. What was I going to do? I thought about my options. I could go to that Bob Shuster and threaten him or beat him up. I abandoned this idea. It's not in my nature. I could pretend nothing was happening. I could play the fool. No, I couldn't. It would eat me worse than any disease. I could stand up to her. I could have told her that I read her little book. On the surface, it seemed like a good idea, but I knew it wouldn't solve anything. In the end, there was only one thing I could do to preserve what little dignity I had left. A dignity that I seemed to have lost with the discovery of my wife's true feelings. I should have divorced her. So I made a decision. I will divorce my wife. First, I will secretly return to her little book, her little fairy tale, and be convinced that I am right. Then I will find a way to bring the divorce to the table. I will do it in a way that everyone will at least pretend to understand. So the fishing trip is over. I returned home full of grim determination. When Susan returned home Sunday evening, she was warmer and more loving than ever. It was a wonderful evening, filled with tender emotions. I felt that great happiness that only an amazing woman could bring. I thought, did she show how much she loved me? Or was it a pity, and the most depressing thing, I knew that there was someone else in the room. The next morning I thanked her and reminded her how much I loved her. She said she was glad I was happy. She didn't mention the word love. That's how the game ended for me. It was just a matter of when and how. I decided to wait until the end of the holidays. In terms of holidays, this included Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. We spent Thanksgiving at my parents' house. Susan followed the script. She was a loving wife, a caring mother, and oh, such an attentive daughter-in-law. I watched this performance with hidden bitterness. How could she not be considerate of the people, my parents, who, despite their own costs, supported her education and provided a nanny when her parents remained invisible? It broke my heart because one day soon I had to tell my parents the truth about Susan and my plans. Christmas has passed. Samantha got clothes, Greg got clothes, a new tennis racket, more electronic items, and the promise of a car in the not-too-distant future. I received the clothes. Susan received clothes and one last special gift from me. I wanted it to be special. Susan was born in May, so her birthstone is emerald, but I remembered that she first met Schuster in January, so I combined the two by making a special necklace. 2 carats of central emerald surrounded by 5 small garnets. Susan said she liked it, but asked why grenades. I said it was for a special occasion, and one day I would tell her. I smiled when I said this, so I'm sure she didn't guess the real reason. Of course, the holidays were filled with parties. There was her office party, my office party, a party with our friends from church, my family had a party, and there was one party attended by close friends and some relatives like her sister. I kept my own secret journal throughout the season, noting when Susan disappeared. Her disappearances became quite predictable, either Tuesday afternoons or sometimes Thursday evenings. Her explanations were equally predictable, her sister's problems, and of course, fairly frequent social meetings that I knew never existed. To maintain my sanity, I stayed away from her notebook. I knew that I would have to check on her one last time, but I was not prepared for this agony. Finally, the holidays are over. My first stop was my parents. I knew it would be bad, but I don't think I realized how bad. I told them everything, about her newfound true love, about her repeated meetings and sympathetic conversations with him, about her diary and all the revelations, including her uncertainty that Samantha was my daughter, and her great respect but lack of love for me. It broke their hearts. My mother started crying. My father started crying too. I told them to avoid any contact with Susan until I broke the knot. I also insisted that they keep everything a secret from my siblings. I especially emphasized that they should keep everything secret from my sister. With her hot temperament, who knows what could have happened? With my parents informed and locked away, my next task was to check Susan's diary one last time. When I went to her dresser one day when she was gone, I discovered it was missing. What's happened? I thought. I soon found out. She simply moved it to her jewelry box, where I found it hidden right under her Christmas present. Did she guess something? I thought. Did she know? There was only one way to find out. I opened the diary for the last time. Reading what she wrote was a bittersweet experience. There were 3 entries that were worth reading, one for November 26th, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, a second for December 30th, and one last one for New Year's Day. Here's what I read. November 26. I felt so sorry for Bob. It was Thanksgiving, and he had no one. I went to his apartment in Pittsburgh to see him. I tried to be light and cheerful. I told him over and over how much he meant. I must have told him I loved him 50 times. He cried once. He tried to hug me, but I told him that no matter how much I loved him, I can't break my marriage vows. It was terrible to see him so depressed. I wasn't sure I understood. Then, after I left, I thought maybe one time wouldn't matter. December 30th. I went to Bob's house again. He was dressed in pajamas and a dressing gown. I immediately knew what he was up to, so I didn't stay long. I wanted to stay. I wanted to hug him and go to bed with him. I told him that I think about him all the time. I didn't tell him that I slept with my husband the night before. It made me feel so guilty. Sometimes I think it would have been better for Jeremy if I had told him how I really felt. If I could just pluck up the courage to say, Jeremy, I found someone else. I want a divorce. But I know how much Jeremy needs me, and there are children. They would never understand, especially Samantha. And lastly, January 1. Jeremy is downstairs watching football. He thinks everything is fine. He doesn't know anything. I can't do this anymore. I saw Bob on the 30th, and he called me at home last night as I was getting ready to go to a party with my husband. I feel like a dog with 2 houses. I desperately want to be with Bob. I want to spend the rest of my life with him, but I already have a house and a family. I have children, a husband who loves me, and I have responsibilities. I can't do this anymore. I have to do something or I'll go crazy. I read everything. I was finished. The time has come, Sunday, January 8th. For the first time in months, I insisted that all four of us go to church. The children were furious. They both had plans. Susan seemed thoughtful. Does she suspect anything? We went to church and returned home. I was adamant, I told them. No one is leaving until we have a family meeting. Samantha and Greg were outraged at first. I had been ruining them all day. Susan didn't say a word. We all took our places at the dining table. I started, "Before I start, does anyone want anything to eat or drink, maybe a snack?" No one moved, so I started. "I'm taking a day off later this week. I'm going to meet with a lawyer and start the divorce process." I waited and waited until what I said was fully understood. Greg spoke first. "Of course it's a joke. I get it. You're angry about something and you want us to guess what it is." I told him, "No, this is not a joke. I'm serious. I decided that I need to leave. I love you all, but I just need to leave. This is not some new idea, not a spontaneous decision, I mean. I will meet with a lawyer and file for divorce." Samantha began to cry. Greg got angry and ran upstairs. I saw no reason to force him to return, so I sat and waited. Samantha looked at me. "Dad," she cried, "I'm sorry for everything I might have done. Please, you're not serious." She started wheezing and coughing and whining. "This can't be happening. We're the only family I know that's always been stable." She paused. "Are you sick? Do you have some kind of medical condition? That's it? You don't want to die before our eyes?" I tried to smile, but couldn't. "No, Samantha, I'm not sick. I just want to divorce your mother. I'll move, but I'll find a place nearby so we can see each other all the time. You know I love you guys. I would never have left you if I had not died." She stopped crying. "Can I leave now?" I nodded, and she left. Then I turned to Susan. "Do you understand?" She looked indignant. "No, I don't understand. I've never heard of anything like that. Are you crazy?" I could see that her behavior was just for show. While the children were reacting, I saw that she was already planning. I wondered, maybe she was just mad because I said I wanted a divorce before she did. I looked at her and said, "Did you ever know that I make big decisions without thinking them through carefully?" She wanted to yell at me, but she couldn't. I could see that behind her thin veil of deep concern, she was thinking about how this would turn out for her and her true love. She sat, and then asked, "So what did you come up with? Who gets what?" I stared at her. "I don't want much. I'll take my clothes and some from my savings, just enough to find a decent apartment. I make a little more, actually a lot more, but she didn't know that, than you, so I will pay child support, pay the mortgage, and together we will determine a fair amount to support the children while they are in school, including college. And one last thing, I will expect unlimited access to my children." She looked indignant. "You've already thought of all this, haven't you? How long has this little show been brewing, Jeremy?" "This is not a performance, Susan," I said. "I mean it. Every word." She stood up. I could see she was angry. "Go ahead. Hire your lawyer. Let's see how far your dirty little mind can go. And then I'll get my lawyer and we'll do this for real." By the end of her monologue, she was screaming at the top of her voice. Exhausted, she sat down again. "When do you plan to leave?" "This afternoon," I said. This stung her. "Today," I said, "the sooner the better." Completely confused, she stood up again. "I'll be gone for a while. Try to disappear before I return." I watched as she took her keys and bag and walked out the kitchen door, slamming it as hard as she could. I thought, well, that went well. I went upstairs to pack my things. Upstairs, I started packing my things. It was amazing, melancholy, amazing, to see how easy it was. I remembered all the times we packed and unpacked things. We first packed to move off campus, then to move into our first real apartment near where we both found jobs, then into our first real home, an old townhouse in need of renovation, and finally into our current home, a nice one. A two-story home in a great neighborhood, a place where I believed we would raise our children, grow old, and perhaps live out our days together. Overall, looking back, it was a good time, a good way to live, maybe without excesses, but I believed that until recently, filled with love. Greg walked in as I finished. "So are you really leaving?" "Yes," I said. "I must do it." "It's because of Mom, isn't it?" he said. "Mostly," I answered. "Do you want to tell me about it?" "One day, but not today. Don't give Mom a reason to worry." "Got it? She doesn't get it yet." "Will you ever tell her?" I picked up the last suitcase and carried it into the corridor. "I'm sure one day she will understand everything." "You think so?" "No," I replied. "She may never understand. Only time will tell." He grabbed my hand. "You don't have to leave, you know." I replied, "Yes, son, I have to." With that, I was able to drag 3 suitcases down the stairs. I looked back and saw Greg standing there. He cried quietly. I thought, another tin soldier. Don't give your mom a reason to worry and be kind to your sister. Now you'll be the man of the house. He sat on the top step and cried as I carried my luggage to the front door, closed it, and walked down the driveway to my SUV. I loaded everything into the trunk, looked around again, got into the car and drove away, thinking, now I'm alone, really alone. I started crying. As I was driving down our street, I saw Susan, parked a few houses down. She watched me as I left. Did I do the right thing? Did not know. Seeing Susan through the windshield, she looked angry and bitter. I realized that all these years had been a lie. She never loved me. I was just that guy, no. I was a fool who agreed to put his own life on hold and name her baby out of some misguided sense of duty backed by the fantasy that she might love me. For almost 20 years, I was a brother, a necessary replacement, the second best, a temporary plug until her real fantasy appeared. Even knowing this, I felt selfish. I had children who loved me. Did I abandon them? Maybe, but that wasn't the plan. That was never the plan. No, give Susan what she wanted, do it in the name of misguided love, and don't care about the guilt. I moved out of the house, found a small apartment near work, and made an appointment with a lawyer. The man I chose was known for his fairness. This is exactly the kind of lawyer I wanted. We sat down, and after agreeing on a rough price, he laid it all out for me. His name was Larry Freeport, and this is what he noted at our first meeting. "Mr. Groff," he began, "if your wife Susan does not contest the divorce, you can be free for 90 days. On the other hand, you must understand that she has the right to refuse to sign any documents within a year. If she contests the divorce, it could take a long time, but thanks to recent changes in the law, she won't be able to delay the process indefinitely. Don't forget that there are many things she can contest: property division, child custody, inheritances, trust funds, legal separation issues, and there are always other hidden waiting periods." He tapped his fingers on the table. "She can delay the process." I explained. I told her that she could keep the house and most of our other assets. I would keep her and the children on my health care plan. I would pay any reasonable alimony and child support, and I would take over the mortgage, insurance payments for cars, and most utilities such as electricity. He replied, "You give her almost everything." "I would like unrestricted access to my children," I said. He asked, "On what grounds are you filing for divorce? Betrayal, cruelty, abandonment?" "None of them," I said, "except that I want a fresh start. I don't want to be married to her anymore. I believe we're just not compatible anymore." He frowned. "If she wants, she can use this to complicate the divorce." I never told him about her new lover. All I said was, "I don't see how it is. I don't think she'll dispute it. I think she has her reasons for wanting a divorce." "I see," he said. "Then I will prepare the documents for you to sign. How and where would you like it to be served?" "Try to be tactful," I said. "Keep it away from the kids if you can, and don't humiliate her at work." He nodded. "That can be arranged." The documents were prepared and handed to Susan as she returned from shopping on Saturday morning. My lawyer emailed me the time, date, and location, and I was satisfied. I expected Susan to sign the papers and move forward with her plans. She didn't. I called my lawyer 2 weeks later. He contacted her via certified mail, and her response came through the lawyer she hired. Mr. Gubbing Freeport emailed me that my wife has hired her own lawyer, a good one. He further claimed that he had submitted all my proposals in accordance with our agreement and was awaiting her response. I looked up the name Mr. Freeport gave me, Margaret O'Connor, and learned that she was expensive and had a reputation. It took a month, but Miss O'Connor did contact my lawyer. Susan wanted me to sign over the house, her car, Samantha's car, and my car. Plus, she insisted that I pay for the car she would buy for Greg as soon as he turned 16. She wanted 80% of all our other assets, all my tools, my sports equipment, and all other related appliances such as my chainsaws, mowers, and trimmers, and my canoe, all of which were to be sold at a profit split at 80 to 20%. She wanted half of any personal inheritances, if I had any. I had to pay the mortgage, cover all the insurance costs and medical bills. I was to pay child support for 10 years at half her salary, including bonuses. Child support was to be set at $800 per month per child until both children were 25, and my visitation with the children was to be limited to 1 weekend a month and every other Wednesday evening, all under her supervision. Mr. Freeport emailed me, "She wants to bankrupt you." I replied that I agreed. I also indicated that I would agree to most of her demands, except for visitation rights with the children. He replied that it didn't matter since Samantha was turning 18 soon and Greg, at 16, had the right to choose who to live with if he wanted. Mr. Britton Freeport also said that if we hinted at these prospects, she might lower some of her other terms. He sent a counteroffer reducing child support to 8 years at 30% of her income, child support to $600 per child per month until they completed their bachelor's degree, and she would be required to provide unrestricted access to the children, even access to her home, until they both graduate from school. To my surprise, my lawyer emailed me to say that she accepted all the terms except unrestricted access to her home, but that she would agree if I offered an acceptable explanation for my desire for a divorce. She also insisted on a hearing before a judge who met her requirements. I emailed back to my lawyer that I thought she probably wouldn't give in anymore and that we should agree to her terms. He emailed back asking about my grounds for divorce other than that I was simply tired of the marriage. I replied, "Try emotional abandonment." He replied, "Okay." A court hearing was scheduled, which was postponed and postponed again. Susan still hasn't signed anything. I knew she was stalling, but I didn't understand why. It took a long time in 2012 before a final date was set. Finally, we met. Before we went to see the judge, my lawyer warned that my wife might still insist on some type of counseling. I said I'd be stunned if she did that. On the indicated day, we entered the courtroom to see the judge. The judge was a young woman, about 40. She was kind to both sides. When asked, Susan agreed to withdraw from counseling on the condition that we discuss what I mean by emotional abandonment. We met that same day in the judge's office. With our lawyers and judge present, Susan and I had what I thought was our final separation meeting. Susan began, "I still don't understand why you want a divorce, and it's emotional abandonment, it's bullshit." I replied, "Susan, I still love you, but I'm sure that your love for me is more like a habit. I firmly believe that if you were free, you would quickly find someone else who you really love." She turned pale and then replied, "There is no one else, if that's what you think about it." I was determined not to mention her lover, but I still said, "I don't believe you. I really believe that you were seeing someone else. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I believe that you found the last one. At least an emotional replacement." She didn't look at me for a few seconds, and then she looked. It was like the parting of the waters. She said, "Yes, there was someone else. I never did anything more than light kisses, but yes, there was someone." She turned in her chair and asked, "I was so transparent. What could you tell that something was going on?" "Yes." I nodded, "Yes." In disbelief, she asked again, "Are you doing this for me?" I nodded again. She stood up and looked at her lawyer. "That's it, isn't it?" Her lawyer smiled. "I guess so." Susan looked at me, taking a step back. "Thank you, Jeremy. Trust me, I will be forever in your debt." I just nodded. And so my 18-year marriage ended quietly, but not without drama. After my divorce announcement in January, my move, and all the ups and downs that came with it, I was still able to see my children. When I talked to Greg, I could see that he had lost interest in school. I could see that he was sinking into depression, but without access to his old home, I couldn't check it as thoroughly as I would have liked. Samantha kept me informed of some of his new and disturbing behaviors. In addition to a group of new, untrustworthy friends, Samantha told me that he had discovered illegal substances and stole money from Susan's wallet to support his habit. I knew I should have seen something coming, but until the divorce was final, I felt helpless. I was sure it was only a matter of time before we had to send him for counseling. With Samantha, the situation was completely different. Her behavior changed, but not in the way I expected. Firstly, she became more caring and less confrontational towards Greg. Imagine, the militant and cocky big sister became a caring big sister. On the other hand, it was obvious that, through conversations and quiet observations, Samantha's relationship with her mother had changed dramatically. Samantha had always been somewhat resistant, and perhaps a little resentful of her mother's dominant behavior and downright rude manner. I didn't see it, but later realized it was because she was so unhappy. She was probably no less unhappy after Schuster arrived, but because she hid him in her pocket, she hid her unhappiness at home under the guise of artificial goodwill. Samantha saw it too, but in a different way. I often spoke with Samantha about her mother and the general situation at home. She had something to say. "Dad," she explained on one visit, "Mom has become a real bitch." I tried to correct her, saying that she shouldn't use such harsh words towards her mother, but Samantha told me, "You don't live with her anymore, so you have no say." I couldn't argue, so I listened. She continued, "She's become unlivable. I stay away as much as I can. She complains and grumbles about everything. You remember how you helped with the laundry, vacuumed, dusted, and cleaned up after everyone. Now she doesn't do that. She expects me to do this, but I won't. This is not my home, and besides, it's because of her that you left." I tried to stop her, but she didn't listen. "Don't pretend, Dad. Greg and I both know about the other man. I asked her who he was, but she denied there was anyone. She thinks we're stupid, Dad. I found him by Googling her iPhone, and I found out everything. His name is Robert Schuster. He works at a publishing company, and—" I stopped her. "I know all this." Samantha squealed. "Then why didn't you stop her?" I told her, "She doesn't love me. She thinks she loves him." "Dad," answered Samantha, "Mommy doesn't know who she loves but herself. I hate her." I said, "Just be patient for now. The divorce is almost over. There's a 90-day period, and then maybe things will change." She asked, "Like what?" I avoided answering. "Do you know how I found out about Schuster?" She just looked at me. "No, how?" "Did you know that your mom has been keeping a secret diary since 2011? I asked. "Did you find him?" "Yes." "Where?" "I got caught. Shouldn't have mentioned that stupid notebook. Besides, she probably threw it away by now. She didn't need her anymore." I said, "Oh, I found her." "Where?" asked Samantha. I replied with a smug smile, "I know that." Samantha got angry. Hands on hips, she snapped, "If you don't tell me, I'll tear the house apart. I'll find her and bring Mom out into the open. I'll do it, Dad. I'll give her a beating, and I'll get to that publisher, too." Now I was trapped. I had to come up with something. "Listen, if I tell you, will you do something for me?" "It depends. You don't live at home anymore, you know. You can't order me around." I pretended to laugh. "You're 18 years old now. Besides, I couldn't order you anything before, so what difference does it make?" She looked at me with a soft expression. Come on, Dad. Okay, I said. The last time I saw her, she had it hidden in the dresser where she keeps her jewelry, but it used to be on the top shelf of her regular dresser. For all I know, she might have moved it again, if she's still using it. Why does she do this? Samantha asked. I left. Now there is nothing stopping her from dating that person. She said, I'm going to find it and throw it away. I said, no, don't do that. If you find it, drag it to your room and make copies of the last pages of it on your printer. No, don't throw it away. Damn, she thinks it's a secret, but it's a secret we know. We can keep an eye on her this way. My daughter looked at me with a sly smile. That's what you think, right? I answered her with a sly smile. Yes. She said, okay, I'll find her and do as you say. Just be careful, I replied. Don't let her get suspicious and, for God's sake, stay away from her. Samantha replied, we're fine. After that, we returned to discussing Greg, his problems, and Samantha's studies. So with Samantha at the helm, I was back in the business of spying on my wife. I thought, how humiliating can this be? But still, having a notebook, I could follow Susan's delusional thoughts. Why I wanted to do this, I really didn't know. I knew I still loved her. Is this an anomaly? Why would I want to continue to love someone who never loved me, even after almost 20 years? I reasoned that maybe this could help me at some point. I thought this might help, but it didn't. Samantha sent me a text message that she had found the notebook and made dozens of copies of the pages. She wanted to know if I needed them. I answered yes. We met Samantha a few days later. She said she made more copies since we exchanged text messages. She handed me a small package containing about 30 pages. I flipped through them. Some were dated just after my divorce announcement. Other pages followed. I took them back to my apartment, made myself some Stouffer's lasagna, and sat down to read. The first entry was dated Wednesday, January 25, and did not say anything unexpected. Jeremy wants a divorce. He moved out. I can marry Bob. Can't wait to tell him. The next one was for Saturday, January 28th. Saw Bob. He's just as excited as I am. He wants to make our relationship legal right away. I told him no, not until the divorce is finalized. He said, why not try other things? I told him that in no case, not when we are so close. If Jeremy finds out about us, he will have real grounds for divorce. Bob got it. I read what she wrote, and it hurt me. The next few things weren't anything special. I found out that Susan's sister, Roxanne, slept with her boss, and her husband Jeff found out about it. Jeff has moved. Susan was worried about her sister and was glad that she had kept Bob at a distance. There was nothing significant in her notes about herself and Bob until April, but there was something else there. I scrolled through it, but Susan was disappointed that no one cleaned up after themselves in the house, that she did all the laundry and vacuuming. I feel sorry for her, I thought. She made me angry. The grass began to grow, and instead of mowing it herself or having Greg do it, she hired a lawn care service. I think what irritated me the most was that I struggled for years to keep our cheap Montgomery Ward lawn mower running. I almost bought John Deere a couple of years ago. Glad I didn't do that now. There was an entry for April 26 that I didn't like. She stopped going to church, missed Palm Sunday and Easter, said people knew about us, and she didn't want to be looked at or asked a lot of questions. She yelled at Samantha because she walked away. A real bastard. It said that she was packing the rest of my personal belongings. She called Goodwill, so I guess they got them. Nobody told me. I wondered if that included my grandfather's flag. My life went on. I tried a few new things, signed up for the Y, thought I was going to swim, and got a cold. I went to several cinemas and ate expensive popcorn. I ate out often, especially at Denny's and Texas Roadhouse. On Thursday, May 5, we met in court. It was all over, but the official final date was set for August, as ruled by the judge. The judge said, just in case. I thought, just in case of what? There will be no reconciliation. Samantha supplied me with new entries from Susan's diary. She started to be more active after our May Day, some Cinco de Mayo, ha. Some of what she wrote was good, at least for me, some not so much. Reading all her nonsense was just a waste of time. I knew Samantha had read it too. I told her I wished she would stop. Anyway, all summer, from what Samantha said, and from what I read in her little memoir, Susan seemed to become two, maybe even three different people. I thought it started with Samantha's graduation. Of course I went. She was my daughter. I was sitting with my parents. Susan was sitting with her parents and her sister. Jeff, husband Roxanne, sat with us. Both groups sat completely separately. Susan wanted to throw a party after graduation, but didn't plan anything. I found out about this and arranged a small reception at home with catering. My parents invited my sister and brothers to bring their families, so between Samantha's young friends and her new boyfriend, it was quite a big party. Susan didn't want this. She really didn't want to be around me, so she and her family went to some restaurant. Greg stayed with Samantha and I was glad that he did. In other ways, it seemed that Susan was becoming paranoid. It seemed that her great lover spent most of his time in New York. This made sense to me since it was his company's headquarters, but Susan didn't like it. From her notes, I understood that she was not sure of his fidelity. Ha, it was a joke. What kind of fidelity did she mean, carnal or emotional? If it was carnal, then it went beyond the bounds long ago. There was nothing specific about this in her notes. It was Samantha who broke the real news. Samantha had a lot to tell. Greg is completely out of control. The only times he was even remotely normal were when I came over, and unfortunately due to my job, that wasn't that often. I was letting my son down and he was going into high school. At least he kept his grades up. I've been keeping an eye on this. I checked his progress reports. He always looked disheveled. What Samantha told me about her mother was really annoying. Susan never liked housework. Who would, so over time I took on most of it. Samantha said her mother's bed was never made, and she didn't think she ever changed her sheets. She rarely went shopping, so she stole shampoos and stuff from Samantha. Samantha said that Mom only grumbles and complains. Samantha had to wash all her clothes. Mom didn't help. Food has become a joke. Samantha said she was tired of frozen waffles for breakfast and pizza for dinner, so I gave her extra money every week so she and Greg could have something substantial. Susan found out and yelled at them both. Then I intervened. It was already August. The divorce deadline was only a few days away when I finally made a special trip to the house to see Susan. I came every week but never saw her. Samantha always made sure she didn't know I was coming, so I caught her off guard. It was a Saturday afternoon, and she was upstairs in bed. I walked through the front door. Samantha and Greg were in the living room, smiling. Samantha rolled her eyes and pointed upward. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and called, "Susan, Susan, can you come down for a minute?" She shouted down, "Fuck you." "Why?" I looked around. All our family photos, in fact only the ones that included me, were taken down. I shouted up, "Please come down. We need to talk." She eventually came down. "What do you need?" she asked irritably. "I want to talk." She frowned. "About what?" I shrugged and spread my arms. "Look at this place. When was the last time a vacuum cleaner saw the carpet?" I pointed to the kitchen. "Are we only using paper plates now?" Then I lied. I checked the downstairs bathroom. "When was the last time someone cleaned the toilet down there?" She exploded. "You bastard," looked at the children and gave them a stern look, then back at me. "This is my house. You don't come here. You don't look around. You come, stay outside, take the children, and leave. Understand?" "Susan," I said, "be reasonable. They want a clean house. It's not fair." She came up to me. "Who are you to say that? You are the one who left. You are the one who wants freedom. Now you think you can come here and give orders?" "Susan, let's talk," I said. "Do you need more money? We can hire a cleaner, but you have to feed the kids something other than Domino's." That was all. She completely lost her temper. "This is my house. These are my children. Get out of my house." I said, "Susan." She screamed, Get the hell out of my house. Get the hell out of my house. She walked to the front door, opened it, and pointed. Get out right now, or I'll call the police. I tried again. Susan, I just want. Get out, she screamed. If you don't leave, I'll call the police. I'll get a restraining order. Get out. I looked at my children. Greg looked scared, but Samantha was smiling. She knew what would happen next. I shrugged and said, Saturday. Both nodded. I walked out the front door. Susan slammed it shut as hard as she could behind me. I thought, this was terrible. Susan looks like she's going to have a stroke. As I continued to read the pages Samantha provided me, I saw that after August things got really weird. First, Susan filled out her little notebook and bought a real journal. Luckily, although Samantha said she had a key, she never kept it locked. Secondly, it seemed that life with Bob did not quite live up to Susan's expectations. The autumn months of 2012, at least September and October, told an interesting story. In fact, it would have been fun to read if it concerned someone else, but I felt sorry for her. Her fantasy was falling apart. By that time, Greg had found a girl and was getting himself in order. I thought, wow, how can a cute girl with a ponytail turn a pig's ear into a silk purse? Yes, little Alicia Shackelford tamed and tied up our young rascal. They both looked good riding around in the little RAV4 I found for him at CarMax. Samantha decided to go to community college to stay closer to home. Between school, my boyfriend, and my work, she and I read Susan's diary together. It became fun. I finally got a good look at Bob, and it was a big ugh for me. Who was Bob, and what did he have that I didn't? Firstly, at 41 I was still in good shape. Going to the Y helped me. Bob not so much. Bob was a chubby little man, maybe 5'10" to my 6'2". He had a cute round belly that hung comfortably over his too tight pants, enough to flag him as a future candidate for serious health problems. I had brown hair, he was lighter, but mine was all there, and he had a beautiful round bald spot that probably looked somehow elegant on an egg-shaped head. He actually seemed like a nice guy, and after August Samantha and I got a full dose of Susan's diary. What did Susan write? Bob and I finally did it. I didn't feel a thing. I love him so much. Jeremy was a hard body, all muscles, a real jock. Bob is soft, not effeminate, no, he's a man, a real man, but he is not obsessed with how strong it is or strong. Bob is like a teddy bear. Jeremy was, well, just Jeremy, big, rude, and boring. Jesus, I thought, how did she stand this for 18 years? It hurt. She never really showed it. I remember that she sometimes said nice things to me. She even said she loved me several times. I knew she loved me when our children were born. I still had a clear mental image of her tenderly holding each child in her arms, holding on to me with one hand. The looks of love she gave to each child were the same as the one she gave to me. I knew that she loved me once. I wondered if Bob had children. Susan wrote other things, but this was the worst. She wrote about how attentive Bob was, how he listened to her every word, and how he brought her gifts. He brought flowers and chocolate. Crap, I did it too. I've never missed a birthday or Valentine's Day. I figured she forgot. Samantha and I were talking about gifts. She said that Mom saw her gifts as part of what I had to do. It was Susan's birthday, and she was receiving a gift. It was Samantha's birthday, and she received a gift. It was Greg's birthday, and he also received something. But Bob gave gifts only to her. I think I understand. I had to. Looking back, everything became cold, not in the weather sense, but the relationship between Susan and Bob, cold for me. It was awkward to read that stupid diary in front of Samantha. Susan became pleased with the graphic. He said he wanted to move into my house. It will not happen. First of all, I think Jeremy is following me. I don't know where he gets the money, but the kids are always going somewhere and doing something. Samantha received a lot of new things, and the money must have come from Jeremy. I mostly spend the money Jeremy sends every month on food. The rest I save or spend on entertainment. I have my own needs. That's something else. Bob stopped paying his expenses. Now, when we go out, he often expects me to pay. I asked him if he was finally going to marry me. He meowed. I'm starting to doubt. He's so indecisive. Sometimes I wish he had just a little bit of Jeremy's toughness. I read this and wondered too, so I checked it out. I learned that it was true that he told Susan that he was a widower, but that he may have misled her about what he did at HarperCollins. He does work there, but he's not a big boss. I couldn't find out how much he makes, but I did find out that he doesn't have a separate office in New York, but shares space with several other employees. He was a petty clerk, nothing more. For all I know, he could work on an hourly basis. That was Susan's problem, not mine. Bob had other problems too. Susan took some notes. She wrote, "Damn, how many shirts does Bob have? 3? No more than 4. I only see him in 2 different suits. Jeremy was grumbling about my house. He should have seen where Bob lives. I miss this about Jeremy. Oh, Jeremy, why can't you leave? You're like a ghost, always there. Sometimes I just smell the deodorant sprayed on top of his body odor, and I think about how I scolded Jeremy for his frequent showers. Maybe I was wrong about Bob. He needs a new car, or at least to wash the one he has. He could at least clean it up. There are packages from McDonald's that must be several months old. I'm surprised he doesn't have ants. Time to shine my shoes, and he wonders why I don't want to show him to my work friends." It was Halloween when Samantha and I read Bob's obituary, dated October 31, 2012. "I broke up with Bob today. He cried, but I just can't take it anymore." I asked Samantha, "I wonder what your mom will do next." "I don't know," she replied. "What do you think?" "I don't know," I said. It didn't take long before we found out. It was Thursday, November 7th, when Samantha sent me a text, "Denny's, 6 p.m." I was there. Samantha was waiting. "Okay," I asked. "What happened?" Samantha replied, "She threw it away. I thought she moved it, but she found it in the trash, a diary and a notebook." "You saved them, didn't you?" I asked. "Yes," she replied, and there was another entry. "Which?" I asked. Samantha said, "Goodbye. Time to turn back. Gotta get him back." I was puzzled. I understand goodbye, but bring him back. Does she want Bob back? Samantha smiled. "No," she called Mary maids. "They've been cleaning the house every day since Tuesday. She said she wanted to go shopping with me. Greg had a game this Friday, and she went. I think she's coming for you." I scratched my head. "You're not kidding." Samantha said, "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know," I said. "It's been a rough 2 years. Remember, it started 2 Januaries ago. I don't think you're right. She has someone else on her mind. Anyway, keep this diary handy. It might come in handy." Samantha added, "Oh, and she asked me if you were seeing anyone." "What did you say?" I said, "I don't know." "Good girl." I sat down and thought, so Susan is up to something. If she thinks I'll come back, that will be a high bar for her. With the diary in Samantha's hands, soon in my hands, I wouldn't want to do this, but I could use her own words against her. 18 years is a long time. I thought we loved each other, but looking back, the unnecessary arguing, nagging, and complaining about little things that didn't matter, I guess, were evidence of her unhappiness. She married me to give her child a name. Thinking about Samantha, I'm glad I did it, but going back to something like that, at least with Susan, it wouldn't be realistic. She would fall back into her old habits, and sooner or later there would be another Bob Shuster. I got up and made myself some coffee. Besides, I thought, I had a pretty comfortable life, a neat and comfortable apartment, a king-size bed, where I had already entertained several pretty women, no one serious. My children survived the worst part of the storm. Greg will graduate from high school and go to college. Samantha attends a local college. In 2 years, she will be able to choose several good public universities. Money has been tight, but the situation will improve. Was I lonely? Maybe not a lot, but I've dated women, quite a few, who weren't as picky as Susan. I had prospects, and at 40, I still had quite a lot of opportunities. I received a text message on Sunday, November 18th. It was from Susan. Thanksgiving is this Thursday. Are you doing something? I answered, parents. Why? She replied, just wondering what the kids thought. I replied, children what? She replied, maybe we could all have lunch together. I replied, are you sure? She replied, yes. I answered, what time? She replied, first game at 13. I replied, 12:30. She replied, eggnog. I replied, of course. I called my parents and told them I would be having Thanksgiving dinner with my kids. Mom wished me a pleasant dinner. I thanked her. So on Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, I was at my old door at exactly 12:30. I was dressed casually, a light jacket, a blue button-down shirt, black pants, and New Balance tennis shoes. Samantha greeted me at the door whispering, turkey isn't the only thing on the menu, Dad. I smiled, handing her a bottle of inexpensive white wine. Got it. I walked in and immediately noticed that the house was immaculate. Everything was clean, all the family photos were in place, my rocking chair looked freshly dusted, the TV was already on, the table was set, even cloth napkins. Susan left. I expected her to come in like the diva she always thought she was, but that didn't happen. She entered rather hesitantly. She was almost shy. I knew my ex-wife and realized that this was not a game. She was scared. I walked over and took her hands and kissed her on the cheek. It's good to see you, Susan. She was wearing a very formal black dress, partially covered by an apron, a string of pearls that I gave her many years ago when we were very young, almost no makeup, and her hair in a simple bun. Still holding her hands, I leaned back. You're still beautiful. She was clearly nervous, almost on the verge of tears. I saw that she wanted to say something. Her mouth opened several times. There were deep sighs, but she did not say anything. I knew Susan and saw that she was afraid. Finally, she said, "You look good too, Jeremy." She made that gurgling noise that people sometimes make before they cry. Her voice sounded low and hoarse. I wondered, is she going to cry? It made me nervous. Once upon a time, I would have hugged her and held her. Greg walked down the stairs, and the spell was broken. If he had been a second later, something important might have happened. He looked at me and at his mother. I'll eat with you, but then I have to leave. The guys are going to Steve's to watch football and meet girls. Samantha stood behind her mother. I can't stay either. Susan stood nearby, clearly depressed, saying nothing. I understood the tension. I had to say something. I looked at my son. Greg, I asked, when is your next game? Next Friday, he replied. At home or away? I asked. On the road, he replied. I said, maybe I'll come. I glanced at Susan, expecting an invitation. My stomach was in knots. I didn't know what to do. I felt that with a few words, with one short sentence, I could change the course of history. I just couldn't find the words. Greg was unimpressed. That would be good. I play fullback just like you. It's a difficult position, I said. Yeah, it's pretty tough, especially if the other team has good receivers, he said. I understand, I said. Together, while Susan and Samantha began setting the table, Greg and I sat down to watch the football game. I was focused on the game, Dallas against someone. This wasn't Detroit. I liked football, but that wasn't the reason I was there. Susan brought me a beer, a Coors Light, and a chilled mug. I should say my chilled mug that she bought me years ago. She was very nervous. She kept looking at me and the mug. I felt embarrassed and sad. I remembered the paper ballerina from the fairy tale. One gust of wind, and she was carried into the fire and burned, while the little tin soldier stood and watched helplessly, even as he himself melted. Both simply disappeared into nothingness. It was a melancholy moment. I secretly watched what was happening between the kitchen and the dining room. I thought, this is Thanksgiving or the Last Supper for a condemned person, or in this case, a condemned family, a condemned marriage. I wished I wasn't here. Just before we sat down at the table, I excused myself and went to the bathroom. For some inexplicable reason, I went upstairs and used our old bedroom bathroom, the one I usually used at any other time. Our bedroom looked perfect. All our old photographs were there. They stood in strategic places with unlit candles. There was a red rose on my old pillow. Red, red, oh red, why now? I noticed that the bedspread and top sheet were raised, as if everything was ready for any occasion. I wanted to cry. We were seated at the table by 1 p.m., much earlier than usual. The girls brought a huge plate of already chopped turkey. I usually cut it in the kitchen, but I guess Susan cut it this time. Out came homemade stuffing, mashed potatoes, corn and bean mix, red cabbage, baked oysters, cranberry jelly, green beans, rolls, butter, and glazed sweet potatoes. We passed everything around. I thought about the food, how much starch there is. It didn't matter, I filled my plate to the brim. I ate every last bite, and when I cleared the plate, I did what I always do. I took it to the kitchen, rinsed it, and came back to get more. Susan smiled. God, I thought, that was a gentle smile, she said. You always did that. I thought, say something, Susan. Say what I need to hear. Say what I'm dying to hear. She didn't say anything, she froze. I said, I like a clean plate. No one said much during the meal, mostly small things, ordinary things, weather, local politics, cars. Samantha mentioned Roxanne, something like too bad. But Susan and I gave her a look, and she went silent. Thanksgiving was becoming more of a funeral than a holiday. We finished the main course by 1:30 p.m. It was a break, and Susan and I were drinking coffee. Greg and Samantha sat patiently next to each other. Around 1:45 p.m., Susan brought out pies, apple cream, coconut cream, pumpkin cream, and a container of tapioca. Tapioca was what her father, now deceased, liked. I thought the tapioca just added to the darkness. The day was cloudy outside, gray skies, dark, ominous clouds. It was even darker inside. Finally, dinner was over. Greg is gone. Samantha bowed and joined him. All that was left was me, Susan, a pile of dirty dishes, and a lot of leftovers to clean up. I looked at her. Now what? She said, could you help me put away the food and wash the dishes? I stood up and said, of course. My mind, my heart was screaming, say something. Say what I need to hear. Say what I'm dying to hear. First, we removed the food. I stood nearby while Susan did this. Then it's time for the dishes. Pots and pans required hand washing, cups, plates, saucers, and cutlery went in the dishwasher. We used her good china and silver. Having never had much money, it took us many years to collect all the silver items. The last piece of silver was a butter knife. I remember how we hugged and how she cried. I vaguely remember her saying something like, we're full now. My insides were screaming, Susan, say something. Say it. How could she not hear me? We were both standing at the sink. Susan washed, I dried. She was scrubbing one of the medium pans, probably the one for mashed potatoes, when she stopped and started crying. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I took the pan and finished washing it. She simply froze for a few seconds, then pulled herself together, wiped her eyes with her forearm, and muttered quietly, it must be the onion. She moved on to the next pan. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we had finished everything. It was like a funeral. It started at noon and was finished by 4. She looked at me. I've never seen such a desperate expression on anyone's face, ever. She stood and stood. Then she said, I'll get your coat. She brought it, walked me to the door, opened it, and said, thank you for coming. I had a great time. I stood motionless. This was our last chance. I watched. Her eyes pleaded, but her mouth did not move. I kissed her cheek. I liked it too. I turned and walked down the steps to my SUV. I opened the door, but before sitting down, I turned and looked behind me. Susan stood at the door, holding a handkerchief. I saw that she began to cry. I wanted to scream, I'm here, run down the driveway, run down the fucking driveway. She waved her hand. I waved back. I got into the car and drove away. Susan and I never went out together again. I never returned to our old house again. I occasionally dated women, but didn't find anyone special. Samantha said Susan wasn't dating at all. She kept the house while Greg was still in school, but put it up for sale immediately after. We saw each other at Greg's graduation and a few other times when there were family events. When my father died, Susan took a leave of absence and helped my mother for a few weeks. I visited several times, but conversations with Susan were always strained and awkward. I never checked that old diary she kept, and I never told her I saw it. Samantha told me one day that she threw it away. I wished that she would burn it. Oh yes, and Susan still works for an insurance company. She's still the assistant office manager. She was passed over for promotion to manager twice. Woman, you know. I'm still just an accountant, no promotions and no plans. I bought another canoe. She enjoyed canoeing. I think about her sometimes, often in fact. I still miss her. Sometimes I sit and look at my phone. I think, maybe she'll call. I wonder if she thinks about me. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.